Welcome to Meet the Candidates. The Frankfort Plant Board is making a very strong effort to bring all of the candidates in here to the studio so you can have an opportunity to meet them, learn a little bit more about them as people, learn about them as office holders, learn about them as candidates for office that they may not have ever investigated before. This is our chance to find out what's happening with the people who are going to be on the ballot this year. On this edition, we're talking with Pat Melton, who is running for re-election as sheriff. And Pat, I know that most people here are fully aware of you as an individual and as a sheriff. But we do have, and we are meeting them out on the street all the time, people coming into the community that really need an introduction. So if you would tell them who you are, what your links are with the community, what you've done thus far, and why do you want to assume this responsibility yet again?
Well, thanks, Jan. I want to take the opportunity to thank the Frankfort Plant Board for the opportunity to come on and as usual, as the candidate forum or meet the candidate. I'm Pat Melton. I am 51 years of age. I've been a resident of Frankfort for over 30 years, and I'm married to Lindsay Thompson, or Lindsay Melton. I have two boys, Patrick and Matthew, 18 and 21, and I grew up in a family of law enforcement. My mom was president of the Board of Aldermen for several terms in Louisville, and we had farms in E-Town, so I had the best of both worlds growing up. And as sheriff, it was something that I've always wanted to do. It's been a lifelong dream to do it, and I love my job. I can't say enough about the men and women of the office. They do a phenomenal job, and we've taken an office from a tax collector to a professional law enforcement agency, which we just got accredited, and all the commitments that I started 7 years ago, we've kept. And I'm very proud to look you in the eye and look the voters in the eye. Every single commitment that we've made, we've kept all our commitments. And I think that's huge, because not a lot of elected officials today can look you in the eye and say, I've done everything I told you I'd do. We've had our thumb on the pulse for the heroin epidemic, the pill epidemic. The first commitment I made was that we were going to get aggressive on the drug trafficking and the drugs and the thugs in this community. And we have. We've arrested more drug dealers in this community than the entire history put together of the Franklin County Sheriff's Office in the last 7 years. I'm very, very proud of that. With that said, jail's not the answer for everybody. We've got addicts, and we've got serious problems that we need to address as a community and as a Commonwealth. Some people, I've heard say, well, it makes it look like we got a really bad drug problem here. Let me tell you, we do have a drug problem here. We have. The key is, I don't know that it's any worse than anywhere else. We're just catching a whole lot more. Jail's not the answer for everybody. I think addicts need treatment and they need help. And it's something that you got to learn the word tough love sometimes, because I'd rather you go see them in the Franklin County Regional Jail than down at Herod Brothers Funeral Home from an overdose, or one of the other funeral homes in town. And we got to take that serious, and I think it is a crisis across our country right now with the drugs and what it's tearing apart families and the death toll that it's taking. We're one of the first agencies in this county and community to carry Narcan. Over the last 2 years that we've carried that, we've had over 5 saves. Huge. And we saved people's lives. I'll never forget, there was a young lady that had stopped in South Frankfort, purchased some drugs. Her boyfriend was driving, had a child in the car, and by the time they got out to Cardwell Lane, she had started to overdose and passed out in the car. By the time the deputy got there, she had stopped breathing, or very, 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 very low breaths. And he issued the initial dose of Narcan, didn't get a reaction. Got the second dose of Narcan, now gave it to her in about 30 seconds. Her eyes pop open, big, deep breath, and she was back. So, and some people will debate you. Well, just let them lay there and die. They don't deserve that. That's somebody's mother, somebody's son or daughter, and they deserve a chance at life. And maybe that's a chance that gives them the shot to come back and get clean and be a productive member of our society.
Do you see any steps that we can take here in this community to not eliminate it? Obviously, that is beyond anything we could hope for. But do you know of any way that we can cut back on this? It seems like really we are increasing the instances and the wide variety of different things that they're using, for that matter. But is there anything we can do as a community to lessen that?
I think we've got to have penalties. People have got to go to jail. If you're trafficking in this poison that's killing our family, our community, our commonwealth, if you're trafficking and you get convicted of that and we catch you, you need to go away. Right now, unfortunately, due to overcrowding, and I think right now in a time our legislature and other people are trying to decriminalize a lot of our laws. And when you do that, what's going to stop you from doing that again? If there's no sanctions, how are you going to modify that behavior? And you're not. I think that's part of it. I think we need to look at more opportunities for rehabilitation as far as medical rehab.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've learned in this job over 7 years, because somebody's an addict doesn't mean that they need to go to Eastern State because they have mental problems. Mental problems are derived from the drug abuse. If you have the rehab facilities for them, the bed space that you can get them in, there's an opportunity, but a 30-day program don't work. It takes months and up to a year to get your brain back off the chemicals that it's been on, whether it's heroin or the crystal meth, either one of those. And we're seeing a resurgence now. We've seen crystal meth or the heroin decline over the last several months, but we're seeing a huge increase in crystal meth right now. So, you know, it's one of those things that we've kept our thumb on the pulse of what's going on in this community. And we're seeing a rise, and I'm looking you in the face right now, we're seeing a rise in crystal methamphetamine. It's cheaper, and people are using that now more than they're using heroin.
What about the rehab facilities? Are they available? What do we do about increasing the opportunities to get them returned to society?
I think we need to look at, like our regional jail, I think we need to look at as a commonwealth all across our state, not just here, everywhere else, but maybe look at a place that a judge can sentence a drug addict, an addict, to 12 months in rehabilitation and have a either state or a federally run facility like a regional jail that has medical staff that can help care to do that. Our jail's not equipped to do that.
That's what I was sitting here pondering. What would we have to do to see that happen here?
Well, I think ultimately it would save you money if we went after the treatment side a lot stronger than what we are. There's not enough bed space right now. If you try to get someplace, there's a wait list, and it's hard to get in, and it's very, very expensive. There is a drug that's out now that you can block, the heroin, the opioids. It's 30-day block on it, and it'll block your body, the receptors from being able to accept the opioids. And all this started with pills, and I think, you know, our medical profession. I think back in the day used to say, "Here, let me give you a prescription here and take them." And then some people would get hooked on that pills, and then next thing you know, they're doing heroin. I'll never forget a young lady that we arrested. She was trafficking in heroin, and she had just shot up heroin in her knee, in an open scab in her knee. And she sat in my office and told me that, and while we were doing interviews and everything else. And she was a nursing student getting ready to graduate from nursing school. So you're talking, you know, $70,000 to $120,000 job. Getting ready to graduate from nursing school, hurt her back, got hooked on pills, and then when all the pill mill stuff stopped in Florida and that pipeline coming back and forth, then she got hooked on heroin, and she was shooting up heroin to get her fix on the opioids after hurting her back. And that's terrible. It's a terrible story. And what an ineffective process. So I think rehabilitation centers and opening up bed space, however we do that, I think it's something huge that we need to do.
Do you see any role for you in that, in developing some new resources for us as a community?
I think it's going to be a legislative issue because obviously it's going to have funding. And, you know, we can look and recommend things. I think that the best thing that we do is that we have been very aggressive on drug traffickers. If you're trafficking in it, and if you see, you've got to keep in mind, heroin sold in 1/10 of a gram. That's called a bindle. That's going for about 40 or 50 bucks. So a bindle of heroin's 1/10 of a gram. So you're talking about the tip of a pin is about what you're talking about for 40 bucks that you're shooting up. So when you see grams and several grams, that's a lot of heroin. That's a lot of dose units of heroin. So when you see ounces, that's a whole lot of heroin. And that so you got to understand what you're talking about. 1/10 of a gram. So you take, for an example, a sweet and low packet, and you show that 1/10 of a gram. That's 40 bucks, and that's what people will buy and shoot up. And the other cost, the other side cost of that is an Indiana Salt right across the river in a county over there that went nuts on the heroin binge was the cost associated with it, the exponential cost of healthcare from hepatitis A, B, and C, and also HIV. And all those are things that are shared with intravenous drugs. And, that's why our needle exchange program has been important, because of the exponential cost of shooting up heroin and the intravenous needles.
I hate to be so mundane about this, but what does this do to the budget of the sheriff's office? How do you manage to fund all this?
We've got two narcotics detectives. Let me tell you a little bit about our budget, because you really need to educate yourself on it. Most other agencies start off at the beginning of January 1, and they start off, if you've got a $2.2 million budget, you start off January 1 and you've got $2.2 million to get you to December 31st. The sheriff's office budget is voted on and approved by fiscal court, and then when it's voted on and approved, you have a spending authority. We earn what we spend. So for every paper that we serve, we get $40. For all the taxes, the 7 taxing districts that we collect for, that's where we earn our revenue that pays for everything else. So October 15th, you start collecting taxes. November 16th, when you get your first big commission, and you got 6 weeks to know what you've got left to spend in your budget, whether you meet that or not. And your bills come in till mid-February. So here's the goal: you try to hit it. And that's how unfair the budgeting process is for the sheriff's office. We have collected over $150 million in taxes, and I've been accountable for every cent, every penny. But that's how we pay to do everything else in the sheriff's office, is by the services that we provide. The court graciously pays for our benefit package for our employees, as they do for every county employee. But other than that, everything comes out of the sheriff's office budget, and we earn that money starting January 1. We start out broke till December 31st. And realistically, your biggest commission is off your property taxes. That's where you make your money. This year it was $36.4 million, and we're close to $36 million right now. We're about 98% collected, which is huge. But over the last 7 years, $150 million, and we're accountable for every penny.
And on a more unpleasant note, your office has had a lot of headlines lately with staff problems. And I am curious, as a constituent of yours, as well as a friend, and I'm wondering what steps you're taking to develop an oversight program to ensure that these things don't happen again.
I can't control employees leaving. We have fought for 7 years to get, I expect professional work for professional pay, and you should too. And here's why. I've lost 5 employees in the last 6 months to the city police that are leaving for a $10,000 to $15,000 pay raise. I had one of them come and look at me and say, give me $1 an hour more. So that's $2,080. How do I give that one individual $1 more and I give everybody else that does the job $1 more an hour raise? You can leave the sheriff's office right now and go to the surrounding counties and do the same job and make more money. So the 5% raise that employees just got in January helps, but you've got to have competitive pay, and unfortunately, the county's not been competitive in a lot of areas. And we've got to get that pay up. I have fought that for 7 years, and we're getting better, but we're still not where we need to be. If you expect quality work and quality employees, you got to pay for what you get. And right now we've got an awesome team, but it's hard to keep somebody when they can leave and all they got to do is switch the color of a uniform and make $10,000 to $15,000 more. It's hard to compete with the small budget that we have.
Is there anything that you can do to take steps to improve that?
I mean,
as a community, what could you ask from us?
You got to have more revenue. You got to have more revenue to operate the office. We're at a point right now, we've put a Band-Aid for 4 years on our fleet. Every fleet, any fleet professional in the country will tell you, you've got to have a rotating basis. Our guys average about 28 to 30,000 miles a year. So roughly 4 years, that car should be done. 80,000 miles is a cutoff to where it starts costing you a lot of money. So, you know, it's all about revenue. You got to have revenue to pay your staff, and other communities supplement their sheriff's office significantly. Shelby County next door, $800,000 a year is what that sheriff gets supplemented. Davies County, Kentucky, $1.2 million. Warren County, Kentucky, 50% of his budget is supplemented by the court. Ashland, Boyd County, same size county as us, over $800,000. We're funding ourselves. The money we earn, that $40 for every paper, collecting taxes and trying to get everybody to pay their taxes. And here's the flip side of that also. The more people that pay their taxes up front, which is my job, we're to collect that money, but on the back end, we don't get the higher penalties. So you're doing great here, and we've increased and have a high collection rate. But because we're doing that so well, we don't get the money in the back end for the penalties, the increased penalties that people have to pay because they're late. So it's a double-edged sword. It's just like our court services. Our budget went up 32% over the last 7 years. 19% of that was when the new judicial center was opened because we had to staff it. It's a 103,000 square foot beautiful facility, but we've got 5 judges. There's over 10,000 people a month that come through the doors. We also have the Commonwealth Attorney, County Attorney, Circuit Court Clerk, and all the services organizations like the Court Designated Worker and those venues, pretrial, and all those folks are in there as well. So we've got 2 magnetometers, an x-ray machine, a control room, holding cells, and you've got 3 floors that you've got to staff. Mm-hmm. So you're staffing a small city. So 19% of that 32% was because of the new judicial center that opened. So you got to staff that. You got to have the personnel to do that. Unfortunately, what we do costs money. It costs money to run a car, to have oil changes, brakes, and to buy them.
Which brings us to more money issues. We have a major problem, not necessarily with your office, but even nationwide, with communication and relationships with the public, with law enforcement of all kind. Especially given the developments with the school problems. Mm-hmm. What is your thought about approaching some of those problems? What do you see happening here with your office and our schools?
Well, first of all, we've got an excellent relationship with the Franklin County Public Schools. Excellent. And I think that showed a couple of weeks ago when we had the threats that were made. And you know, I talked, Mark Hopp and I each wanted to send a letter out that Friday when all that went on in Florida, just to bring a sense of calm. We've got 3 professional school resource deputies in our schools. They do a fantastic job. They average about 100 criminal things a year. They do another 500 or 600 things a year that you never see, but they're always there. And we've had a state-of-the-art active shooter program since 2013. We were one of the first in the state to develop it. Deputy Chappell come up with it. It's called Fast Path. We actually trained on it. We run EMS through it. So we've got some really neat things in our schools. Our children are safer than they've ever been. But with that said, the relationship is huge. Tactics is huge. All 3 of our school resource deputies are all SWAT certified officers. They've all been through SWAT school and been active members of a SWAT team. So, I mean, our children's huge. It takes time on some of these things, and some of these things you'll never find out who did it. But I talked about when we made the arrest with this juvenile, I talked about the investigative process. It takes time. We've got very competent people, and they do a fantastic job. And Deputy Chappell did an excellent job. So did the Franklin County Public School staff. Greg Rouse, the principal at Western Hills, did awesome. And him and Monty make a great team together, because there's things Monty can do and there's things that the principal can do that help each other. So it's huge. And that worked out well, and we were very successful with that. What the public doesn't know is there was another 7 things that happened that we investigated so quickly that we were on it between the patrol deputies and the school resource deputies, that we were able to disconfirm those really quick. So it never, it was taken care of before the public ever knew anything about it, because they weren't credible threats. And, our schools are safe, and it's the safest place to be for our children in Franklin County Public Schools. I assure you that. And our 3 school resource deputies do a fantastic job in the job that they do. They're very well trained, and we're lucky to have them.
And I do want to ask you too, along those same lines of people not being aware of things that are happening for their own protection and their own good. So many communities across our nation, as you know, are having difficulties in the relationships with their law enforcement officers and facilities, and developing some major problems in the way they handle that. We've not had that here. What is happening with that to make sure it doesn't happen? I mean, it doesn't just out of the blue. What are we doing?
It takes work. It takes work. We don't, I think number one, because of training. We've had officers and deputies across the country that have made some very poor decisions. And nobody polices the police or sheriffs better than sheriffs or police. That's why you have policy and procedures. That's why you have those things that are important. And I think training, number one. And the one thing that I wanted to bring when I ran 7 years ago and again 4 years ago and I got reelected was I wanted you to take ownership in the sheriff's office. That's why we did our Facebook page. It's not saying, look what I've done. It's keeping you informed on what's happening in your community. And that's important to our public. They need to know what's going on. They're not an ostrich, and they don't need to go stick their head in the sand. They need to know, and that's one way that we do that. Our text a tip. We've opened up a 2-way communication with the community, and we'll send tips back. Hey, what about this? When they send something, well, what about this? And people are like, oh, wow, hey. We've been very successful in that relationship with the community because we're out there. I campaigned on the 4 corners of being in this community, and we're out in every 4 corner. We're out in all of them. And the men and women of the Franklin County Sheriff's Office, they do a phenomenal job. And the training, the relationship that we have, we started the Sheriff's Citizens Academy. Huge opportunity for people to see who we are, what we do. And I tell everybody, and our first one starts tomorrow night, I'll tell everybody, what an opportunity. The best thing for me that I want you to get out of this is to meet the men and women of this office and see what a great job they do. Because when you see it firsthand and you see why certain things happen and we do things a certain way, you're educated. And all of a sudden you're like, well, I know why they're doing that. Or if you're watching a show on TV, well, they're doing that because of this. It's one of the best things we've done. But that interaction with the community, huge. You can't buy it. You got to work at it. And our guys and gals have done just a tremendous job at that.
Do you have any steps for ensuring that continues, or making more improvements?
I think as you continue on, I think, first of all, you got to be patient. If we do have an incident, us, the city or the state, if something would happen, there's an investigative process that takes place. And that takes time. Sometimes that takes a little more time than what you think. And you got to be patient. The rumor mills, just like the school threats, the rumor mills went circle and circle and circle and circle. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we got to come back. You got to give it and get the facts. You can't feed into the rumor mill.
We're unfortunately coming down to the end of our allotted time, but I would like for you to look at this camera over here and tell our viewers why you're the best candidate and why they need to vote for you. And if we haven't touched on an issue you want to talk to them about, now's the time to do it.
I'd like to ask you for your vote and support. I'm Pat Melton, and I am your sheriff. I've been your sheriff for the last 7 years. I've kept all my commitments to you that I've made. I've done everything that I said I'd do. We've been aggressive on our drug dealers in this community, and it scares me to think the last 7 years, had we not been doing what we've been doing, where our community would be. We've got a professional sheriff's office, the communication, the two-way communication, and we're involved in our community. We're your sheriff, we're in your neighborhood, and we work for you. I'd like to ask you for your vote and support on Tuesday, May 22nd. Again, thank you so much for the opportunity to spend time, and thank you for watching.
And I want to encourage our viewers to look for the information about the April 26th forum. Make sure you participate if you possibly can, and join us for the election returns on May the 22nd. We're planning to bring you live coverage, hopefully from the clerk's office. And don't forget to come right back here for more Meet the Candidates.